this morning, our program is entitled, Is It Time for a Death with Dignity Law in Florida? Our guest speaker is Karen Parker. She joins us today, and I want to tell you a little bit about her from the biography that she sent to me. Kate is the co-founder of the Florida Death with Dignity grassroots organization and is helping to create a strong infrastructure, providing the tools of success and spearheading community involvement from her home in the Villages. Drew, she's in the Villages. Drew is in the Villages as well. Aside from spending 30 years in management in the high-tech industry, she has spent most of her adult life's free time working for fundamental rights on an individual level on behalf of those less fortunate through various religious and civic organizations. She is also an avid supporter of the Death with Dignity movement on the West Coast. She holds multiple college degrees, including a bachelor's in theology and a master's in business administration. Now that she is retired and living in Florida, Kate has made it her new life's goal to bring the Death with Dignity option to all Floridians. Kate, welcome to Humus of the Treasure Coast. You have the podium.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to speak to your group today. I'm very pleased to be speaking to very much like-minded people. So thank you. I appreciate it so much. And going back to your earlier quote from Emily Dickinson, I feel so strongly and so passionate about having medical aid in dying available to all qualified Floridians. I will feel like if we can get this passed, that I will not have lived in vain. And I actually feel like if we can get this passed, that we will do so much good for people in Florida, just being able to relieve the suffering that people suffer needlessly at the end of their life, just because we have the laws that prevent it rather than laws that allow it. So thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that you enjoy and that you learn something. And so I will just take it. So here I need to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Share. And okay, can everybody see my?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You just want to get to your full screen.
There we go. Okay.
You got it.
Okay, great. All righty then. So we are Florida End of Life Options. And we have a bill. It actually, not to digress right off the top, but we did not get a bill this year in the legislature, but our bill would have been titled Medical Freedom for Floridians with Terminal Illness. Okay, so who we are. Florida End of Life Options is a grassroots initiative educating Florida legislators and the public about an end-of-life option called medical aid in dying. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. So what is medical aid in dying? There's a lot of, misinformation out there. So I'm just going to give it to you straight and hopefully simply. Medical aid in dying is an end-of-life option that allows individuals to legally request and obtain medications to end their life in a peaceful, humane, and dignified manner at a time of their own choosing, according to their own beliefs and values. Not everyone qualifies. There are very, very strict requirements for eligibility. You would have to be an adult Florida resident. terminally ill within 6 months of death, within a reasonable expectation. So you may have a terminal illness like, say, Parkinson's or ALS or cancer, but having the illness alone does not qualify you. You have to be within a reasonable expectation of 6 months until death. So anyway, you also must have the mental capacity to make your own healthcare decisions. So sadly, in my opinion, this people with any kind of mental illness or dementia do not qualify for medical aid in dying. And then you have to be able to self-administer the medication. So the reasons for these qualifications is also part of the safeguards for the patients. Being able to make your own healthcare decisions, having the mental capacity to do so, and thereby eliminating this option for people with dementia. It prevents that slippery slope that would be so easy for opponents to say would so easily slide into the slippery slope. So rather than just continuing to fight that argument, there is no place in America that would allow someone with dementia to do this. There are other locations around the world that make allowances for people with dementia, but that is not in America. Okay. The patients have to make 2 verbal requests with the waiting period in between. And that allows it allows the patient and the doctors to ensure that this isn't just a panicky reaction, that this is a well thought out and reasoned end of life option. And this is what the patient indeed chooses, not in a panic, but with thoughtful deliberation. Then they have to make 1 written request that is witnessed by two people. One of them can be a loved one, but the second witness has to be someone who has no interest, no financial interest in the patient's affairs. So it can't be the nurse at your doctor's office because she works for the doctor's office and therefore has a financial interest. It can't be, someone who's in your will. So, find a good friend, your next door neighbor or whatever. All they're doing is coming in and witnessing that, yes, you signed that document. So that's another protection. So people that want you, it just increases the integrity of the process. And then finally, the safeguards for the patient includes the fact that life insurance policies understand that medical aid in dying is not suicide, and therefore when they pay for this, when they pay out your benefits, there's not a question. If a patient participates in medical aid in dying, their death is actually legally recorded as the cause of their disease, whatever their disease was, not suicide. It would be like the cancer that killed him or the Parkinson's that finally killed them or whatever. Okay. And then patients are protected from illegal contracts in that no contract can make a stipulation that the patient either has to participate in medical aid in dying within like 60 days or that they can't participate. And people might think, what? But just think of this scenario when say you get that final, you get the 6-month notice. Yes, there's nothing else we can do. And most patients in your stage of disease or in your state of health, they rarely live beyond 6 months. So you now qualify on that regard. Sometimes that patient will want, and they have $1 million life insurance policy. Sometimes people want to sell their life insurance policy so they can have some of that money now while they're still alive and do something big and wonderful with it. So when those companies that would buy your life insurance policy, if they were to say, we'll buy your life insurance policy on the contingency that you participate in medical aid and dying within 60 days, that contract would not be legal, because only the patient can make that determination for themselves if or when they decide to take that medication. So there can be no contract that would stipulate one way or another, and that's just another protection to the patient. In addition to safeguards for the patients, the medical providers and caretakers are also protected. First off, being that two physicians have to agree that the patient meets the criteria for the law. They have the mental capacity for their own health care. They have the terminal illness, a reasonable expectation of 6 months or less to live, and that they can actually self medicate themselves with that medication, that it doesn't have to be injected in them. So having two doctors confirm all that is a protection for the physician. Then no medical professional can be forced to participate in medical aid and dying, should they find it that against their own ethical thoughts or their religious ideology, or they just don't want to. They don't want to get to that step with their patients. They can just say, I will not participate in, and that's their right. And then they can change their mind. Sometimes they start out, no, they have a fear that the law won't really protect them. But when they realize that it does, and, then they can change their mind and go ahead and practice. So the doctors have their own protection in this as well. And then one of the foremost protection for doctors is that if they follow the steps and the guidelines from how the law is written, which is very specifically written and outlawed. And in fact, verbiage is given for like the written statement of saying, yes, now here's my written statement that I want medical aid and dying. All of these are very well defined and lined out in the law. And if the doctors follow the steps in the guidelines, then they are protected from all civil, criminal, and administrative prosecutions. That means that law enforcement can't come and file a manslaughter or murder charge against a caregiver because their patient participated in medical aid and dying. It means that disgruntled family members that didn't approve of what mom or dad did, and that now they're going to try and, sue the doctor because mama shouldn't have been able to do that. You allowed her to do it. No, nobody can sue the doctor criminally or civilly. And even more is that their administrative prosecutions. So for example, doctors sometimes work out of multiple facilities. They might work out of St. Timothy's Hospital, which is a Catholic hospital, and the Catholic hospital will not allow medical aid and dying because it's against their religion. But the doctor works there. So while he's working in their facility, he cannot, help a patient with medical aid and dying there. But if that doctor also works at, like, say, Florida State Hospital, one of the university hospitals that would allow medical aid and dying, the Catholic hospital cannot retaliate against this doctor because he's doing it at another hospital. So they can't change his administrative rights within their facility. He will still have all the access and everything that he's always had. He can't be discriminated against because he's providing medical aid and dying prescriptions at another facility. So these are the things that keep doctors safe from prosecutions and able to act according to their own beliefs and values as well. And that doesn't apply to just doctors. It applies to healthcare facilities and other, in-home health aides and such. If everything is followed according to the way the law is written, then these caregivers cannot be prosecuted. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what our current end-of-life options are in Florida. First off, you have the right to decline treatment. So if you, like, say, need kidney dialysis or a feeding tube or an oxygen tube or something like that, if you do not want, or cancer treatment, if you do not want to follow through and go on to kidney dialysis, or if you don't want to take another round of chemo, you do not have to. You can just say, no, I'm done. I'm just going to live out the rest of my life. And that's that. That is your right. Nobody can make you take a treatment that you don't want to. Hospice care. We have pretty good hospice care in Florida, from what I hear, particularly at least in the highly populated areas. I can't speak to some of the more rural areas, but I think it's available as much as possible. And palliative care, which is hospice care, but then with, like a little bit more pain relievers and such, to help keep the pain of your end days, at bay. And the voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. This is a difficult method, but it is used, it's legal, and sometimes it's the only way that a patient can hasten their death when they're suffering intolerably and they just want to stop it. And basically that just is you stop eating and drinking, and then, your organs start to shut down until you finally die. So when I look at these end of care options, I just feel like so strongly that, yeah, we have something that can make these deaths better than just suffering until the end. So where medical aid in dying is legal in the United States. Today, all the green spots, today, there are 14 jurisdictions. Last year alone, we got three new bills through the legislature. That was Delaware, Illinois, and then it passed through the both houses in the New York legislative committees. But the governor didn't actually sign it for New York until the first week of February. But so I count that as last year. We got three. But so we have 14 jurisdictions already in the United States. Then all the yellow states are working like us in Florida with grassroots organizations trying to get it working through to their states. So you can see that this is very clearly a law whose time has come. People want it. Our healthcare systems and our healthcare laws haven't kept up with modern medicine, and then our laws, which were meant to be protective when they were first enacted, but now they're also archaic when we have better, more humane and compassionate ways for those who would choose that. And it is a small number of people that choose it. But for those small number of people, it's everything. And people ask me why I do this. I've been doing this in Florida for 6 years now. And I think it'll probably take about another 5 years. It takes about 10 years we've noticed that to get it passed. And this is my passion project. Even though I'm just a volunteer, I work a lot on this. This is almost like a job for me. And it's because my mom, even though she was in hospice care at the end of her life, she had a very painful bone cancer. And the hospice medications, first off, they didn't agree with her well. She had terrible hallucinations and nightmares, and it was terrible for her. And the last 2 weeks of her life, she literally just cried and begged every day to let her die. And it's just like, this is 21st century America. Nobody should have to beg and die like that. And that is why I don't want that death for myself. I don't want it for my children. I don't want it for anybody I know or love. I don't want it for anybody. And when I first moved to Florida 8 years ago, it took me a while to realize that we didn't have that law here. I lived on the West Coast. We've had it there for almost 30 years. I just, you don't think about the rest of the country. You've had it for 30 years. It's just what people have, It took me a couple of years to realize we didn't have this in Florida. So I started looking for a medical aid and dying group or death with dignity group in Florida. I couldn't find anything online. So I called the national organization and said, get me in touch with your Florida people. I want to help. And she goes, it's funny you should call. Just last week, we had another guy call from Florida. So you two are it. No, so 6 years ago, my co-founders, Tony and his wife, Helene, who live in Melbourne Beach, and I, who live in the Villages, Florida, started Florida Death with Dignity. We go by Florida End of Life Options because some of our people of disabilities in our organization sort of took offense to the term dignity. So now I think we sound more like funeral services, but whatever, it's still the same. It's Death with Dignity and it's a Florida End of Life Option. But what we're really trying to get is a medical aid and dying law. So who of all these people in America, who is it that supports medical aid and dying? So our last national poll was in 2020, the Gallup poll, polled a good sample of everyone across the United States, all demographics, all men and women, all races, all age groups, all education levels, all political leanings, Republican, Democrat, conservative, moderate, liberal, and all religious. And on average, 74% across the board support medical aid and dying. So this was in 2020, pre-pandemic. And when you look at this poll, the demographics of it here, even the most conservative and the most religious, even of those groups, over 50%, 55 and 57% support medical aid and dying. So that says a lot, that this is something that has crossed that threshold. More people are in favor of it than those who oppose it. So we worked with this poll for a while, but Florida's special. We are literally very special. There is no other state like Florida in the country. I don't know exactly what the percentage is. I should find out. But a large percentage of the people that live in Florida have lived their lives in other states and moved here, either in their retirement years or in their midlife. And so we didn't necessarily grow up in Florida, where I think most other states, large components of those states are people that are born in those states. So we have a big mixture of people from all over the country that live here, all various leanings. And then we also have the political situation now in the conservative and in the Republican Party in particular, between Trump and DeSantis and all of that swirling and the fear, the control that they have wielded, which is unlike power, really unlike the power ever wielded by governors and other people in any kind of party, where even the lawmakers are afraid to be blackballed by the governor or blackballed by Trump for not agreeing with everything that those two people want. Now, that is unusual and it's unsustainable. But that has been our politics for the last 5 years or so, almost since we've been doing this for 6. So, I mean, this was something that was swirling up and actually coming to pass right while we're trying to get this law passed. So we realized that, yeah, this is a nice poll and it's a great thing of what the country at large is looking for. But we recognize that Florida isn't just another state in the country at large. We really needed to get Floridians only. So last year we were able to tack on to another poll, so we were able to get our poll questions asked without having to go through all the expense of commissioning our own poll. So University of North Florida has a political science department and they regularly poll Florida residents. So we were able to ask 2 questions that were on another poll, and that is, would you support a medical aid in dying law? And then also ask, and give them some of the details concerning the safeguards for patients and caregivers. And then the second question we asked, because this is very important as well, is it important for you to know whether your lawmakers are in favor of medical aid in dying or not? So with that poll, we got legitimate Florida residents only polling, and we were really very pleased with the results, considering our political state in Florida right now, that of all voters across the board, averaging 63% of Floridians support medical aid in dying. Against 72 or 74? Let's see. 74% in the general population of the country. But only 28% opposing. So 63% with only 28% opposing. So that's more than double. More than double people support rather than oppose. And if you look at the Republican Party, 65%, Democrats 74%. And so you can just see that this bar chart, more than double the people support than oppose. So let's talk a little bit about who opposes medical aid in dying. Well, like I just said, according to our Florida poll, 28% of Floridians oppose. So who are those? They are primarily religious groups, the ultra-conservative, the Catholic Church, and the ultra-conservative Protestants, some medical groups, and some disability groups. So let's just dive into that a little bit. So like I mentioned before, the Catholic Church, their stance as an organization is no, that medical aid in dying is suicide and that it's a mortal sin. And so I was really surprised by this poll when we saw that even though the Catholic Church is very against it, 70% of Catholics themselves are for it. And so then you go to the Protestants, and so then I was surprised by the high number of Protestants, that the high number of these conservative Protestants, still 53%. The Jewish population, 83%. And when you average all the other faiths, 70%. So this is like something that's really important because this is the primary opposition that we have. And so it's very important that we find faith leaders that break out of the pack. And so what I've been doing for the last couple of years, like during the season, like say from October, November until the end of March or April, I I work very strongly in community development, like out talking to people at farmers markets and street fairs and you're just out talking to people, trying to get supporters like that. But in the summertime, when it's too hot for our Pacific Northwestern little girl here, I take to the phones and to email. And for the last 2 summers, I have made it my mission to find faith leaders in Florida State that will give us statements of support. So when we're working with the legislators, that we can say, yes, the Catholic Church is against this, but I have a statement of support from a Catholic priest in Florida who stands in support. And then our poll saying 70% of Catholics support medical aid in dying. I can go and say, I've got, a Baptist preacher, a Baptist leader who is willing to give us a statement of support. So this is what I've been doing. I've been trying to find a statement of support from spiritual and faith leaders across the state of Florida that will help give our lawmakers the support that they need when they get the opposition. Because when our law comes, when it gets close to it's working its way through the committees and it's making traction, the Catholic Church and the deep pocket conservative religious organizations will fund ads and billboards and such against medical aid in dying. So we need to be able to give the lawmakers opposition to that opposition, saying, yes, those are what they believe, and they have the money to make a big noise. But we also have 70% of Catholics and 53% of Protestants and 70% of all other faiths. Not all religious people are against it. So we have to give them that support, because guess what? The legislators are people too, and they fall in those same demographics of 74%, or in Florida, 68% of people, even the legislators, support medical aid in dying. We just have to give them the support that they feel like they can vote for something and not be concerned about being blackballed. So, okay, enough about that. Okay. Okay, so then support from physicians. While originally, like the American Medical Association, the AMA, and other support groups came out, negative towards medical aid in dying, saying, as an organization, we don't approve of this. We feel like that it goes beyond the scope of what a doctor should do or whatever. But in recent years, even the AMA has withdrawn their negative stance on that and just taken neutral. Like it just should be up to every doctor of whether they feel that it is moral and ethical or within their own religious beliefs that they could, offer medical aid in dying prescriptions. So while some doctors, 28%, according to this 2020 Medscape poll, it was a poll taken of only physicians, not nurses or other types of caregivers, only doctors. And so in 2020, you'll see that 55% of doctors were in favor of medical aid in dying. And then another 17% said, I'm in favor of it, depending on things. Like, what would it be depending on? When would you favor this? If a person has a terminal illness, if a person can make their own healthcare decisions, if a person has 6 months or less to live, if a person can take the medication themselves, yes. So when you add those two, that leaves 72% of doctors in favor of medical aid in dying, with only 28 against. So when we get a medical aid in dying law in Florida, part of our team is already out working with medical groups and physicians associations and healthcare associations, working to educate these people. So that when the time comes that our law comes, we will have a group of doctors that are ready to move in and step up when the time comes. And then this next one is maybe even the hardest. That was people with disabilities. When this law first passed in Oregon in 1997, the American Disabilities Association and other disability organizations were a hard no. No, they were afraid that people with disabilities would be discriminated against and coerced into taking medical aid in dying when their caregivers finally were tired of caring given or spending all their inheritance caring for the patient. And so the people with disability, or the organizations that are there to protect people with disabilities, their rights, were against it. But over the years, especially in the early years of when this first came out in Oregon, almost 30 years ago, every time somebody used this law, there would be all those organizations against it trying to like litigate. They would go and sue the doctors or the caregivers or whatever, trying to test the law. And, you know, not a single case has ever, in this 30 years, with all these 14 states, not a single case of abuse or coercion or anything wrong has ever been proven. This law works as it is designed to work. And they call it like the golden law because even though it has been fully litigated on every point, it has always stood that and protected those it was supposed to protect. And so now we were able to get this poll that was taken by the Susquehanna Polling and Research Organization in February 2023, and they polled only people with disabilities and then also people who live with someone with a disability. And 79% of people with disabilities want to have a medical aid in dying option available to them. And if you look at the demographics of that, 65% Republican, 79% disabled, 83% of independents. And so you see that, and so now in this time period, like the ADA has come out and they have changed their stance from negative to neutral. And there may still be a few out there that are negative, but most of the disability organizations have changed their stance from negative to neutral because, you know, it's what the people with disabilities want. And there have never been any abuses, you know, so this is a strong, safe law. Okay. So what is the state of MAID in Florida? So we talked about in the country last year, 3 new states were able to join the ones that already had it. And about 10 to 15 states every year get sponsorship in their legislature, or they get ballot initiatives. And so it's moving throughout the country, but what is it doing in Florida? So for the last 3 years, we have had bills in both houses, bills and sponsors and co-sponsors in both houses. This year was a little bit different. We weren't able to get sponsors in both houses. And I think that was because we had some off-year elections last year, many House seats and such that needed to be filled. So there were some new a fair number of new representatives in the House. And then with the midterms coming up, where like DeSantis will be terming out. And so there's a little bit of shuffling going on and political play going on. we weren't able to get a House sponsor in time for the deadline. So when you don't have a bill in both houses, you just let your Senate sponsor go so they can sponsor something else. Because it takes both, you have to have a bill from both houses to get it through. And if you don't have a bill in both houses, let's not waste, let's not waste good space. We'll just rebuild. So what we're doing this year in response to not having legislation pending, we are pushing forward. We remain undaunted. While this is unusual and sad, at first we were really sad that we didn't get sponsorship. We were like so good. We got sponsors with our first 3 years. We had bills in. That was like, we're ahead of schedule. Yay. But this year we didn't. So we're like, sort of like refocusing what we're trying to do now that we have this extra time. So one of the things that my primary job with medical aid and dying in Florida is the community outreach. I think I already mentioned I spent a lot of time going to organizations such as yours, doing presentations, educating the public at large, hoping for volunteers and that kind of thing. But also trying to find local action teams. So like just yesterday, I was in the Tampa Bay area, working with a group at farmers markets, talking, educating the public, getting petition signatures. Next week, I'll be in Orlando. It's like during this season, we're out. And so I spent a good part of the time from November to mid-January in the south part of the state, in Miami and Naples, trying to get action teams organized. And so that's my primary focus during this season until like the end of April. And then I will revert back to my summer thing, coaxing faith leaders across the state. But another thing that we do is, and Tony and Helene, my co-sponsors, they have primarily taken on working with and educating the lawmakers and getting to know the lawmakers and building support, for future bills, for future use, but also working with the physicians and the medical facilities in the state, educating them. And so they're doing something, they're working on the more pillars of support, like finding support from organizations like end-of-life doulas, hospice workers, hospice organizations, nurses unions, doctors organizations, that type of thing. So this is where we're spending our big efforts for this next year when we don't have legislation pending. We're just out there trying to get things going and moving and shaking in Florida, because that's what it's going to take. We need the groundswell that's going to move anything. And in case you were wondering, will we ever get a ballot initiative? The answer to that is no. In case you didn't know, first off, they have made it nearly impossible for grassroots organizations to get ballot initiatives in Florida. In fact, there were 14 grassroots organizations that were trying to get ballot initiatives for this upcoming election in 26, and not a single one has qualified yet. The bar is so high, it costs like $10 million. And even then, you don't get the ballot initiative like those 14. Now there is one. The marijuana lobby is trying again, and they said that they have turned in 200,000 more signatures that is required. And at the time of the deadline, all of those signatures hadn't been counted yet, but they had been submitted. So it is possible that the marijuana lobby will get back on this year on the ballot. But at the last election, they spent $60 million But because the Florida legislature had required a supermajority, they didn't pass. They passed the popular majority, but they didn't get to the supermajority. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they require from a medical aid and dying law too. I could be wrong, but it makes good sense to, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So, but anyway, so $60 million that they spent to get their ballot initiative and all the education and advertisement, and it still did not pass. So there is no way that we will ever get a ballot initiative. So our only way of getting this law is to work through the legislators, which is why it's so important that we get the support from the public at large and from communities, from community organizations. So I think I just told you how you can help. One of the most important things, and this is like anytime I have someone that says they want to volunteer, one of the very first things I do is I just say, tell me your story. Write your story down. Why you support medical aid and dying, because this is the humanistic part of this. Is sure we have to get it with legislation, but this is not a political issue. This is a humanitarian issue. It's a compassionate issue. So tell us your story of why you support medical aid and dying. Whether you're like me and I'm doing it because I've experienced a terrible death of a loved one, or whether you support it just because it's your right. Who is the government to tell me that I can't take medication and die peacefully in my own room? Why is it their right to have anything? It's my death. It should be my decision. Whatever reason that you support medical aid and dying, write it down. And the reason I say that is because first off, we have a place on our website and in our social media where we share our stories. That's what makes it human. That's the compassionate flow that we need. But also, it helps you quantify what it is that makes you want to support it. And it makes it easier for you to talk to others about it. And the more people are talking about it, the quicker it will pass. And then also, once you get it written down, it's easy to just take that little paragraph or two and drop it into an email or a letter to a legislator or to a newspaper editor and say, "Dear editor, here is a letter for your letter to the editor column. We support medical aid and dying because this." Once you have it written, that is such a very powerful tool. And then you can share it with us and we'll share it with others.
I want to interrupt you for 1 minute. Dear Kate, we want to make sure we have time left over for Q&A.
I'm sorry. Sure.
So, and I know this slide is very important to you, but we are running a little bit long. And
I'm sorry.
make sure people have an opportunity to ask you questions. So
yes, go ahead. I'm ready.
Dear Kate. Oh, okay, you're ready there. All right. So you want to leave that up probably for a little while.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a lot of good information. I learned a lot of stuff today. I appreciate it very much. You put a lot of effort into your presentation and your talk was really good. I appreciated it.